Hello and welcome to Winning Classroom Management. I hope you are staying warm this evening on this cold day. I am Aaron Dafford. I'm an author, educator, coach, trainer. What I want to share with you is just some ways that you can do a classroom management reset with your students. We came back from the break and we're already going to most likely take an extra day off here in the DFW Metroplex, which means sometimes our students need an opportunity to just get regrounded in what the expectations are. So this is a great opportunity for us as educators. If we don't necessarily like the direction our classroom management is going, take a moment and pause, and we're going to spend this next hour together really thinking about different ways that we can set up our classroom for success. Tons of ideas here, and all of this is free, available in an ebook. You can find it at my website, aarondafford.com, if I'm going a bit too fast. So let's start about what it takes to have a solid foundation. So I want to use this idea of a table, right? We know that this is a typical table, and if we want to play to win the classroom management game, we're going to need 4 different things working in unison: belonging, relationship, engagement, and discipline. And if one of those things is out of alignment, if one leg is shorter than the other, then we know that those books, that learning, will be unsuccessful and will fall. So we need that solid foundation. And there's no such thing as an easy fix in education. It's a large system, and multiple things have to work together. So without that solid foundation, what happens if we just go in there and just try to do our best, but we don't necessarily think about all of those areas? Well, we end up just chasing kids around and fussing at them and trying to get them to sit down, be quiet, and do their work. And that's exhausting, and it's not very enjoyable. Our lessons become less and less rigorous because we really think in the back of our minds, well, I'd love to do this fun activity, but what are my kids going to do? I would really enjoy giving them manipulatives and doing a hands-on experience, but I'm afraid they're going to, and then fill in the blank, right? So our rigorous lessons, the engaging lessons, can't be taught because of behavioral concerns, and then ultimately that affects achievement. And so when our achievement drops, then that really affects a lot of things that are important to us, and then ultimately we get burned out. And so what can we do to build a solid foundation that is very well researched and is easy to implement? Well, that's what we're going to be spending this hour looking at here. So I want to use this metaphor here. Since we're in the NFL playoffs, right? What do we know about successful coaches? We know that successful coaches win games through a variety of means. They don't just show up on Friday night, or they don't just show up on a Sunday. They create and execute a game plan that capitalizes on their team's strengths and exploits their opponent's weaknesses. They conduct practices to train their team in the skills needed to execute the game plan, going over the plays again and again until they become second nature, drilled into muscle memory. Finally, successful coaches make in-game adjustments to adapt their plan to the context of the game, because you know that your best plan only survives first contact with the enemy. So you have this great behavior management plan, and then you get a new student, or then it's a snow day, or it's a field trip, and then something changes. How do you make these in-game adjustments? So through planning, practice, and these in-game adjustments, victorious coaches win games, they win championships, and that's what I want us to do here this evening. So what is our game plan as teachers? Well, we're going to build belonging, we're going to develop relationships, and we're going to design engaging instruction. All of those are part of our game plan. We are going to do all that work ahead of time so that we're going to chart that course of success for students' behavioral regulation. We are also going to practice skills. We can have the best plan, but our kids have to be good at doing the right things. So we're going to use praise to notice and reinforce pro-social behaviors. Now, you might not be as familiar with that term pro-social. Think of it as the opposite of antisocial. So we know we don't want kids to be antisocial, but a lot of us stop when we get our kids to stop doing the wrong things. Why don't we spend as much time trying to get them to do the right things? How can we actually encourage pro-social behaviors? And then finally, what happens if they misbehave? What happens if you set everything up and things just go sideways and they throw a fit, or they mouth off, or they trip another student? We will get to that at the very end. We have to have those in-game adjustments, but we're not going to start right at the very end. We have to have all of this foundation before we can actually talk about that redirection of misbehavior in the moment. So, if we want to play to win the classroom management game, we're going to end up restoring the joy of teaching. I know a lot of teachers are facing burnout. There are a lot of things that are outside of our control in regards to districts and state testing and principals and the culture of the school. A lot of those seems like we can't really affect that directly. But as educators, we can close our doors and we can teach our kids to the best of our ability. That's what we have control over. And if we have a good game plan, if we practice our skills, we know how to make those in-game adjustments, we will restore the joy of teaching. So let's look at our first one. Our first pillar, remember there's 4 pillars, is going to be belonging. So think of these 4 pillars as our foundation. The first thing we need to look at is belonging. And there's going to be a lot of things I talk about this evening that might be a new idea, but if I say something and it makes you think, you know what, I do that, or I do a pretty good job of that already, go ahead and give yourself credit. This is all not going to be brand new. You are most likely doing some of these things already. What I want to do is solidify and maybe upgrade the things you're already doing, or maybe shine light on something that you might not be as familiar with. So, what is belonging? So simply defined, belonging is an affinity for a situation, location, or group. People are inherently social creatures and have a powerful need to belong, fit in, and connect with others. Social psychologists have long studied people to ascertain how and why they form groups and how those groups affect their actions and behaviors. Many truths have been discovered in the social sciences, including the groups that people belong to are often fundamental to their sense of self and understanding of who they are. People also show a readiness to find collective solidarity with others and can quickly create a shared sense of identity. When a group identity is activated, it can have a profound effect on people's goals, emotions, and behaviors, and most people are likely to conform to the behavioral norms associated with an active group identity. Now, this psychological language might be new to us, but most of us know what this is like if we are church-going, or if we go to some type of club or event. We know that there are certain things that we do at that place of worship, or at that club, or at that event that we wouldn't do at home. And there might be things we do when we're at the ball field watching our kids play or our niece and nephew play that we wouldn't necessarily do at a funeral. We know that there are different expectations for different social settings, so why not, as teachers, leverage that? When children feel like they belong in your classroom, when that social identity of I belong to Miss So-and-so's class or Mr. So-and-so's class, that is going to help activate that social identity of being a part of that group, and along with that will be the social norms that you instill in them. So, belonging is very important. The brain is an electrical structure, and its primary energy source is human connection. Specifically, we're going to get a little technical here. The neurotransmitter oxytocin produces trust and reduces fear, setting up curiosity. Alongside oxytocin is dopamine, another neurotransmitter which is released when engaged in pleasurable activities such as exercising or maybe even an exciting science lesson. So put together in the classroom, oxytocin and dopamine are released through connection and curiosity, respectively. This fuel is what powers learning and allows students to handle increasingly rigorous cognitive loads. Students are more likely to take learning risks in an environment where they feel safe, valued, and supported. In other words, where they have a sense of belonging. So, belonging in the classroom has these 2 major components: teacher-student relationships, which will be discussed later as another foundation, and group identity. Group identity forms in many ways, even unintentionally. However, when we want to play to win the behavior management game, that means that as teachers we are intentionally creating a beneficial, supportive group identity for students to belong to. So, entering a classroom, it can it can seem risky to some students. Students have to be taught to read, but they don't have to be taught to speak. Speech is a natural function that is designed into the existing structures of the brain. Likewise, children will learn to walk on their own, but they have to be taught to sew or to play soccer. So speech and walking are what we call inborn behaviors, and sewing and playing soccer are what we call learned behaviors. So confusing these two types of behaviors can hide a powerful truth from many educators. Here's what we need to remember. Seeking to belong to a social group, even in your classroom, is an inborn, not a learned behavior. It's wired into children's DNA, like the ability to hear and mimic speech. That means when children enter your classroom each August, they are subconsciously asking themselves a series of questions. Do I fit in here? Should I even want to belong to this group? What are the expected behaviors? What does it take to belong? So groups that provide a sense of belonging are attractive to students because they scratch an essential itch. Even more importantly, human connection or belonging powers the brain. So here's the first reflective question for you. What are you doing to intentionally build this sense of belonging in your classroom, so that when students come in for the first time or for the 50th time, they know they fit in, they know what the expected behaviors are, they want to belong to that group, and they know what it takes to belong. So, how do we build that sense of community? Each of these pillars are going to end with some strategies. Some of these you might already be doing, some might be new for you. So let's quickly go over them. First, you can establish healthy norms and maintain them. While it may seem obvious to teachers, classroom behavioral expectations are sometimes not as apparent to every student. For many students, there are two sets of expectations, the one the teacher says verbally, and then the ones that the teacher actually enforces. When a discrepancy between the two exists, students have difficulty adhering to the group identity because they don't know what that means from moment to moment. So norms, or that's just another fancy word for expected behaviors, should be phrased positively rather than negatively. So instead of saying, don't say rude things to each other, a classroom norm might be, support one another in learning. Explaining the norms in detail and modeling them will help students answer the question, what are the expected behaviors? What do the students what to do when the students do not meet these expectations? That's going to be covered in a later pillar, discipline. Second, we can utilize collective rewards. While every student likes rewards, sometimes handing them out creates a set of winners and losers. Reward systems, however, are activated in the brain when in-group members, that means classmates in a classroom with strong social ties, receive a reward. So psychologists call this basking in reflected glory, and that's why it's evident every Monday during football season, fans across the country wear paraphernalia from their favorite team to celebrate a victory that they really didn't contribute to. So even though the fans didn't affect the outcome of the match, they reap the beneficial feelings from that victory because they feel like a part of that team, even if their social identity is just to be a fan of that team. So in the same way, classrooms that have a healthy sense of belonging can multiply the effects of rewards exponentially by making them collective rather than individualistic. The rewards can be not only for academic achievement, but also for exhibiting pro-social behaviors that support learning and community. For example, the class might earn an extra 5 minutes of recess when a set amount of positive behaviors are exhibited. So win as a team or as a class. And then finally, use inclusive language. Simply put, use plural pronouns in the first person, we, our, rather than the second person, you or your. A group identity is reinforced when students are constantly reminded of it. Speaking in the second person highlights individual actions, individual strengths, and individual weaknesses. Using inclusive language, however, subtly but consistently drives home the group identity and the fact that classes struggle or thrives together. The human brain is connected through the connection with others. Our connection with our social peers, our connection through our social relationship powers the brain. So that's going to be our first pillar, is building that sense of belonging. Let's go to our second one, relationships. So let's go a little bit into our child development, attachment theory is extremely important here. Relationships are important because attachment is key to healthy functioning, and we're not going to get good behavior out of students if they are not functioning healthily. So attachment is, in the psychological sense, a deep, enduring emotional bond between people. For most students, the primary attachment figure is one or hopefully both parents. When those are unavailable or insecure, other caretakers can serve as attachment figures such as grandparents, older siblings, or other relatives. While teachers cannot directly influence the attachment relationship that students have with their parents or caretakers, they can themselves serve as attachment figures. And so many of us can tell a story about a teacher that made a difference in our life, whether it be in elementary school, even secondary school. Most of us had that teacher that really just changed us. And in that moment, that teacher was that attachment figure, that secondary attachment figure. Attachment is crucial to healthy social emotional regulation because it liberates children. Students with a healthy emotional attachment feel safe to explore the world. They have a safe haven to retreat to when they feel threatened, tired, ill, frustrated, or just unhappy. They can take risks, from riding a bike for the first time to trying to decode a multisyllabic word, knowing that they have someone they can turn to for soothing and restoration. Remember, learning is a fundamentally risky behavior. It asks students to stretch beyond themselves to a place of uncertainty, adding to the repertoire of knowledge while being exposed to the possibility of not knowing, doing it wrong, and all in front of their peers. Learning can be downright scary for students, but those with a secure attachment can weather the storm, knowing that they have a safe harbor to retreat to when the going gets tough. And hopefully, ideally, these students have strong attachment with their parents, but even if not, teachers can serve as that secondary attachment figure. And when students have secure attachment, it lets them take academic risks. You can't learn without taking academic risks. So let's look a little bit more at relationships. So for some students, the strong teacher-student relationship simply serves as an additional layer of support because they already have a secure base at home. For others, their teacher might be the only thing anchoring them in a frightening, chaotic world. Teachers can evaluate their relationships with the students by answering a few simple questions. Do students instinctively move toward teachers or away from them? Are students genuinely glad to see their teachers? Do students readily share their work with their teachers or even things from their lives? And do students express affection for their teachers? The more these questions can be answered affirmatively, the stronger the attachment students have with their teacher. So now it's a little bit time for reflection. Think about those students that you struggle with the most. And can you answer these questions with that student in mind, affirmatively or negatively? The opposite, the negative, is plain to those who know what to look for. When we have insecure relationship with students, they move away from the teacher. They demand attention or overly seek help. They may be possessive, dependent, and needy while resisting classroom routines. An insecure attachment might show up as aloofness, or it might be closer to an unhealthy clinginess. Students who have a robust, supportive relationship with their teacher, on the other hand, develop a healthy personality and emotional well-being. This in turn translates into academic achievement and pro-social behavior. The root of all of this is a secure attachment, something that is within your scope as a teacher. So, teachers who play to win the classroom management game do so from the foundation of strong teacher-student relationships. You're going to give your students strong psychological benefits. It's going to help their emotional well-being, their self-image, their self-regulation, and it's also going to help them behaviorally, right? We're not here to control students. We're not here to make them behave. They have to see themselves as someone that is worthy, someone that is equipped to be able to meet their own needs and meet the needs of others. That's what gives them the ability to have pro-social behavior. Because each student has an internal model of themselves. And they develop this internal model based on, you guessed it, their attachment type. When students have secure attachments, they view themselves as worthy of love. They view others as trustworthy and caring. When they they have an insecure attachment type. They view themselves as unworthy of love, and they believe that no one is going to look out for them. These internal models ultimately affect how they will approach classmates and teachers. And when we get into our fourth key, discipline, that's that fourth leg, it is only made possible when strong supportive relationships exist. That's why we don't jump straight to how do we redirect misbehavior and how do we discipline students. If you don't have a strong relationship with a student, it's not going to work, because there are no magic tricks that can keep students' behavior in check without a secure attachment. Behavior management without relationships will at best get compliance, but more likely it's going to result in behavioral chaos. Relationships aren't simply a nice add-on to have, they are crucial for any successful behavior management plan. So it starts with belonging and it grows to relationships. When those are in place, then you can start thinking about disciplining students. So how do we do it? Well, here are a few strategies, but of these four, I think most of our teachers get this at a deep level, so most of us feel like we have pretty good relationships with students. But let's just think there might be a few things that I might be able to throw out there that you might not be thinking of. First, interact with the whole child. For many teachers, high-stakes testing, in Texas it's the STAR test, is the ultimate evaluation of success. This, in turn, can easily transform students from beautiful little humans into a performance band. Right? Are they high approaches, low approaches? That student is meets, that student is masters. Instead of saying Juan or Carla for who they are, students are interacted with sometimes according to the level of proficiency. Oh, Juan is tier 3. Carla is fine, she's tier 1. Doesn't need any extra help. Students are more than their performance band. They have hobbies, they have interests, they have hopes, they have dreams. If they like playing Roblox, learn the lingo to connect with them. If they're into K-pop, learn to differentiate between BTS and Blackpink. When teachers can connect with children on a personal level, that places the relationship on a much deeper level than one simply revolving around core content. Next, this is one of my favorite strategies because it's so easy. We need to cultivate social interactions. Content will always be the forefront of the classroom. That doesn't mean there's no room for social conversations. Instead of taking time away from learning, it actually creates more time, because students with stronger relationships with the teachers, they misbehave less and they focus more. So a simple way to get started is to meet the students at the door each morning. Several teachers already do this. It doesn't get old. They want to see a smiling face. You could be the first smiling face they've seen that morning, so greet them at the door. Give them a hand, greet them by name, maybe have a secret handshake, fist bump. This sets the tone of each class on a positive note. Another strategy is called 2x10. So when teachers recognize a relationship with a particular student is weak, so think about that one student that you've just really not been able to figure out and just drives you nuts sometimes. This is when you try 2x10. So what you do is you dedicate 2 minutes of uninterrupted social conversation for 10 straight school days. So if we start on a Monday, that's 2 weeks. And that's all you do. 2 minutes, uninterrupted social conversation. Talk about what they want to talk about. You're not giving them feedback on their essay or their ECR or their SCR. You're just talking to them about what they want to talk about. 10 straight days. In this unstructured time, the student drives the conversation. You're simply a passenger. By the end of those 10 days, your relationship will have changed. And then finally, bring yourself into the classroom. Students emotionally connect with real humans, not cardboard cutouts. Rather than hiding your personalities and hobbies, many teachers have discovered that students are fascinated with facts about them outside of the classroom. They love hearing about the teacher's children and pets, the sports they might play, or even what they did over the weekend. When teachers open up in a healthy way and share themselves with their students, it creates a sense of vulnerability that the students recognize and respond to. Instead of thinking less of them, students will appreciate and connect with a teacher they view as a real human rather than simply a fact-spewing automaton. Students can only learn when they feel safe and secure. That comes from belonging. That comes from strong teacher-student relationship. We're on to our third foundational pillar, engagement. So, let's take a moment and think about what motivates students. Because you can get all the best activities in the world planned. You can have a strong sense of belonging, classroom culture, behavioral norms. You can have great relationships. You love the kids, they love you. But if your classroom is boring, and if your lessons are low level and just not very engaging, you are going to get misbehavior. And it's not because they hate you, it's because they're bored. So we also need to dip into engagement and think, how could we design better engaging lessons? Well, let's look at a way to think about student engagement, and it's this acronym CRAVE, and each of these 5 letters stand for something. So there are 5 different facets of student motivation, and when we can design our instruction that leverages these 5 facets, we will have more engaging instruction. So the first facet of student motivation is competence or confidence. Students are always asking themselves internally when they're given a task, can I do this? When assessing their abilities to accomplish a task, students usually evaluate 2 separate factors, right? Their current abilities and their future prospects. So they rate their perception of their current abilities against the task demands. Oh, I think I can do this. I've done something like this before. Students also think of their future prospects, right? So they are thinking about, do I think I can complete this ultimately? Do I think that I will be able to do this whole project, or is it simply out of my reach? So if external factors such as task difficulty or random chance prevail when they're thinking about, oh, this is just some random thing, students feel less competent and can lose interest. So if they don't feel confident in their ability to do a task, they will lose interest. That's why we need kind of that Goldilocks. Not too hard, not too easy, right? Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. The second facet is relationships, which we just discussed. But this aspect embodies the social nature of students and answers the question, does this connect me with others? Learning is a social event. Humans are designed to have deeper, more nuanced learning in groups than in isolation. So relationships not only include teacher-student relationships, but also peer relationships. And when students feel deep belonging with a group of peers focused on learning, led by an empathetic teacher, misbehavior almost becomes a non-issue. Third, autonomy, or the desire for choice and freedom. This motivational need answers the question, do I have to do this? Teachers unknowingly oppose this innate desire in students when they control most or all of the elements in the classroom. Many teachers rule their classrooms as benevolent dictators, making all the decisions and inadvertently causing some of their students to rebel. Students who feel both competent and have some degree of autonomy lean toward intrinsic motivation. You need both of those if you want your students to be intrinsically motivated. They need confidence in their abilities, and they need to have autonomy or choice. This is much more desirable than externally controlled motivation, because that more than often than not results simply in coercion. The fourth facet of this CRAVE model is value. This motivational need answers the question, why am I doing this? What does this mean to me? Tasks or activities that students find meaningful, whether to accomplish a goal or because of some personal relevance, are more engaging than disconnected, meaningless tasks. When students can find the connection between a task and a larger picture or goal, such as maybe, fighting for a scholarship, getting a good grade, passing the test, or just simply learning something because they're interested in the topic, the task gains significance and engagement increases. Finally, we have emotions, and those 5 spell CRAVE. Emotions play a key part in student motivation. They serve as the gatekeeper to learning and answer the question, how do I feel about this? Emotions are not separate from thinking, but are instead an integral part of cognition. They play a key role in reasoning and memory formation. Students in a positive emotional state are primed and ready to engage, while those in a negative mood find it difficult or even pointless to engage with a learning task. Of the many desirable emotions for teachers to cultivate, interest is one that directly impacts student engagement and achievement. So, taken together, the 5 facets of CRAVE serve as a theoretical model to understand student motivation. This, however, is only half the story. The other part of the engagement equation is instructional design. So when lessons are constructed to leverage the motivational needs of students, engagement flourishes. When those needs are not planned for, the students find that lessons can derail due to disengagement and misbehavior. Because honestly, engaged students don't have time to misbehave. Now that doesn't mean they won't get a little bit antsy. Sometimes they get a little bit amped up. But some teachers, their problem is not the student's behavior. The problem is the instruction itself is not engaging, and that's why this model is helpful. How can we build lessons that develop the students' competence, develop their relationships, more social, gives them voice and choice, is more meaningful to them, and it's just fun. So look at this model here. Engagement is the intersection here between student motivation. So on the left here you see student motivation. That's the CRAVE model. That's what the students bring into it. But on the right side is instructional design. That's you as the teacher. That's what you're certified for, you're trained for, that's what you're degreed for. You are the instructional designer. And so when you design instruction keeping the students' motivational facets in mind, you're more likely to design engaging instruction. Now, that was a 5-minute overview. There is a lot more out there. If you want to dive into student engagement, those 3 images on the top, those are some books I've written on student engagement. I also have a free 5-part webinar on the left. And then if you want to drink from a fire hydrant, I have a 20-part web series that talks about creating the classroom culture of your dreams. All of these are available on my website, as is the ebook for this whole thing. So if that was a bit quick on student engagement, there are a lot of opportunities here to get more information. So how do we design motivating instruction? Well, let me give you just a few pointers. First, scaffold lessons to include multiple entry and exit points. So it's a stretch to assume that one lesson can meet the competence needs of every student in the classroom without any modifications. Students subconsciously perform a Goldilocks ritual with most lessons, looking to see whether or not it's the right fit. If it's too easy or too hard, they disengage. To combat this, teachers can focus on the entry and the exit points. The entry points include how students enter the lesson. Not every child has the requisite skills, so some might need a short reteach right before, or some type of aid like an outline, a reference chart, anchor chart, vocabulary notebook, worked examples, exemplars, to assist in the cognitive demands of the lesson. Additionally, the exit point should always be considered. The demonstration of learning that students produce to show knowledge of the content can easily vary to meet the needs of each student. Teachers who customize the learning task by adding or removing layers of support or demands ensure a best fit for a wider range of students. And then giving students choices in how to show their learning also addresses that facet of autonomy. Second, provide leadership and choice. Humans want to feel in control. All students are humans, therefore, students want to feel in control. Teachers can saturate students with autonomy by designing opportunities for them to demonstrate leadership in the classroom. Now, this might take the form of classroom helper jobs. Many of us already do this. We have a materials manager, we have a zookeeper if we have a class pet, or maintenance jobs like the sanitation engineer, aka trash collector. When students feel responsible for a part of the classroom, it satisfies their need for control. Additionally, providing choices also feeds into the motivational facet of autonomy. They can select where to sit to complete a task, whom to work with, or even whether they want to complete the evens or odds if they're working a set of math practice problems. The more choices that you give students that are meaningful, the more engagement they will have, because they feel like they have a little bit of control over their environment. Finally, lean into fun. As I talked about a little bit earlier, emotions are the gatekeeper to learning. Classrooms should look more like a disco than a funeral parlor. And instead of distracting students, high energy and enthusiasm are like nitrous oxide, or if you're into the Fast and Furious, NOS, to their learning engines. Students learn through play, so gamifying lessons and introducing a low level of competition increases engagement. Positive emotions increase attention, They also increase memory formation. So fun should be something sought after every day, not just on party days and during the last week of school. Engaged students, remember, are so interested in learning that they forget to misbehave. And that's our goal. We want them to be engaged because we know that also affects achievement. So we've talked about 3 of the 4 pillars: belonging, relationships, and engagement. That's the game plan. Remember our opening metaphor about successful coaches. Before the game starts, successful coaches have a game plan of how they want to play on offense, on defense, both based on the strengths of their team, but also on the scouting report and the weaknesses of the opposing team. So as a successful teacher, what are you doing to intentionally, not just accidentally, but intentionally build belonging amongst your students, to build that social identity collectively so that you can set your norms together and that students know, I am a part of Mr. Daffern's class, and in Mr. Daffern's class, this is how we behave. You want that that sense of social identity. Secondly, how are you building those relationships intentionally? You are setting aside a time to talk with students, specifically targeting those students that need you the most. The ones that you want to push away the most are the ones you need to bring in the closest, because those are the ones most likely disrupting your classroom. So how are you bringing them into your circle so that they can see you as a secondary attachment figure? And then finally, engagement. They can love you all day long, they can love being a part of your classroom all day long, but if you're just standing in front of them and talking, you're not giving them a time to engage with each other, you're not making it fun, you're not using hands-on materials, all the things that we know make it engaging, you're going to increase disruptive behaviors. That's the game plan. But how do we practice those skills? Successful coaches don't just game plan, they also have to run their players through lots of practices in order to make sure that they have the correct skills down, muscle memory. Well, let's look at that next. These next 2 about practicing skills and game adjustments, we're going to really take that 4th pillar, that discipline, we're going to break it down into 2 parts. So we've come to that part of how do we directly affect student behavior. So first off, let's talk about praise. And praise is a subsection of discipline. We're focusing on the pro-social behaviors. Correction will be next. That's what to do when students are misbehaving. So let's talk about your superpower. Every teacher has a superpower, whether you know it or not, and you're using it either for evil or you're using it for good. Your attention is your superpower. Whatever you pay attention to in the classroom is what you will see more of. I'll say that again for those in the back. Whatever you pay attention to, you will see more of. So if you are spending your day fussing at low-level misbehaviors, sit down, be quiet, open your books, pay attention. You are giving that your power, and you are subliminally telling your classroom, if you want my attention, this is what you need to do. So we end up creating this loop that we can't get out of. Many teachers, unfortunately, are unaware of this power, and they inadvertently spend a lot of time reinforcing the negative behavior that they actually want to see less of. So teachers who play to win the classroom management game help students practice the pro-social skills, remember, not antisocial, pro-social, that they will need to be successful. Instead of focusing on what students are doing wrong, utilizing the power of attention, help students see and practice the correct behaviors they should be imitating. So we should focus not on the antisocial behaviors, but on the pro-social behaviors that meet our expectations. This, in the literature, is called differential social attention. And this approach informs students that they will not be subjected to psychological pain. Trust is built because poor behavior or behavior that misses the mark is not called out. So this is where we have to think about, are we willing to change our practices? Rather than fussing at kids all day for the things they're doing wrong, we are instead going to focus on the pro-social behaviors that we see that meet expectations. Now, if that sounds crazy, And if that sounds like something that you don't think you can do, let me just ask you the Dr. Phil question about your current practices. How's that working for you? Because if your current practices of fussing at kids for low-level behaviors is working, then you won't see them repeated. But if you have to repeat your admonitions to kids, if you have to fuss at them all day long, it's not working. And it's because you're reinforcing those behaviors, because you're giving it your attention. Students, instead, that are meeting expectations should be praised, while poor behavior is ignored as much as possible. Our next session will talk about, or the next section will talk about what to do when you can't ignore it. But if you can, you're going to ignore those low-level behaviors, because what you're going to do is you're going to allow those students a chance to correct their actions and receive the much needed praise that they need without going through a cycle of shame and belittlement. No one likes being called out in front of the class. Just because they're 7 doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt them. Imagine being in a staff meeting after school and the principal calls you out because you are 5 minutes late. Think about the shame that would bring to your mind, being called out in front of your peers for doing something wrong. Just because they're 7 doesn't mean they don't feel those same things. So we need to break that cycle. Instead, we are going to praise the prosocial behaviors that we see, and this gives students the space to begin to regulate their emotions, inhibit their inappropriate behavior, and pursue their developmental potential. So, only pay attention to the behaviors that you want to see repeated. And if you are focusing on the negative behaviors, you are guaranteeing you will see them again and again and again. So what does praise mean? Praise, I created another acrostic here for it, just like crave. Praise is personal, recurring, assorted, immediate, specific, and enthusiastic. In other words, all praise is not created equal. So, praise helps to shape student self-identity. Praising students for their prosocial behavior helps them see their self-identity, create this idea of they are moral, they are compassionate people. In other words, you're helping them see themselves as good. All people, including children, tend to behave in ways that align with their concept of their identity and what kind of people they are. So, if you've ever had a conversation with a student and they say they're acting poorly because they're a bad kid, they're simply acting out of their sense of self-identity. They view themselves as a bad kid. So how can we build their sense of identity so they see themselves as a good kid, or they are the type of kid that helps their friends, they are the type of kid that pays attention, they are the type of kid that doesn't disrupt others? How do we build that positive self-identity? Well, we use praise. So we're going to use those letters, and first off, we're going to get away from generic statements. Okay, generic statements are like eating a snow cone with no syrup. It's just ice. So when we praise students, we make it personal by including their names, directed at someone or at a few students in particular. So the statement, "The class is getting out their textbooks," is a broad description. It's vague, it's impersonal. Instead say, "Jerome has his textbook on his desk and is ready to learn." It's personal, and Jerome is probably feeling pretty good about himself because he's ready to learn. And if you're using that as an opportunity to subtly remind someone that next to him that doesn't have his textbook out, you are doing so in a way that doesn't bring shame or belittlement. Secondly, praise should be reoccurring. Now, this is going to be a hard part for teachers, but it's not going to have to last forever. Television broadcasts, think of it, the last sporting event you watched. They typically have 2 types of announcers. Okay, there's a play-by-play caller. They're just talking, just steady narration. They're constantly describing what you can see is happening, but most of us don't like watching a sporting event without someone talking at us. So they're just describing what is happening. Then you've got the other guy. The other guy is typically what we call a color commentator. They chime in every once in a while. They're an analyst with, a particular point of view, but they're not. You can't have 2 people talking all the time. So when you start out this new thing. And if you've never done anything like this, it is going to feel a little bit strange. So you want to ramp up a little bit slowly. You need to be that play-by-play praiser. You need to have a steady, recurring stream of commentary that is describing positive behaviors. Because what you want to do, remember, give your attention to what you want to see more of. So you're going to name and call out a lot of pro-social behavior. Okay? You are feeding energy into the things that you want to see. So to begin with, you will be a play-by-play praiser. Eventually, as the class gains a firm foundation in successful behaviors, you can slow down, become more of a color commentator, and just as you need to, you can chime in. But you're gonna, especially if you've been guilty of just kind of fussing at kids, you've trained them, and it's January. You've trained them. You've had 4 full months of training them. You get my attention by doing the wrong thing. So you're going to have to reset with them and train them by your actions, not your words, that they get your attention by doing what is right. So it needs to be recurring. So patterns are great for math and science, but not so much for praise. So the third key is it needs to be assorted. Mix it up. Even if they're personal, students will quickly tune out to praise if it's the same 3 statements used again and again and again. Mix things up. Keep it fresh, or else you're going to run the risk of proving the adage, familiarity breeds contempt. Don't say the same things again and again and again. If you need to, script a few things out. Ask ChatGPT about some variations of how you can praise students. They have tons of great sentence starters there. Fourth, this is important. It needs to be immediate. Attention reinforces the behavior when it is given immediately. If you're going to use differential social attention, it has to be immediate. Even if teachers were to tie a praise statement successfully to something that happened 5 minutes before, maximum effect only comes from when it's an immediate reward. Think about how animals, and honestly, this is kind of what we're doing. If you've ever trained a dog, how animals are trained to do something or perform a trick. You have your treat in hand, the trainer helps them perform a task, and then boom, you immediately reward them with the treat to show them that that is the desired behavior. That rapid reward begins to associate the trick with a positive outcome, and a habit is born. So too much space between a positive behavior and a praise statement waters down its effect, which means you've got to be always on it. You have to be that play-by-play praiser initially until students get into the swing of things. Fifth, it needs to be specific. This can make all the difference in the world, and this is how you start redirecting students that are doing the wrong thing if you give a specific praise statement to someone who's doing the right thing. If a teacher were to say, "I see that Caitlin is ready to learn," that's a praise statement. Students that might want to mimic Caitlin's behavior to receive your attention, they're kind of left to their own devices to figure out how to copy her. What does it mean to be ready to learn? But if instead the teacher specifies Caitlin's behaviors by saying, Caitlin has a pencil out, she has a piece of paper, she's put her heading on top, and she's facing the board waiting for instructions. Other students now have a clear, specific pathway to be successful. And if you have a student starting to do those things, praise them as well, especially the one that you're trying to get to change their behavior. And then finally, praise statements must be enthusiastic. So much of what is communicated is not through words, but through tone of voice, through facial expressions, through body language, and other nonverbal factors. Teachers can say, DeAndre is lined up behind Janice with 2 squares in between, all day long. But if you're trying to get them to line up correctly, and it's with a flat tone and neutral expression, students won't know whether that's a compliment or you're just describing the state of the universe. You need enthusiasm. And when you have that enthusiasm, you imbue your praise with statements, and you give it that stamp of approval that makes it worthy of everyone's attention. And they want your attention if they like you, if they feel like they belong, and if they feel like they have a good relationship with you. So none of this works without belonging and without a relationship. But guys, students want to please you. They want to be successful, they want to be liked, they want to be successful, and they want to please someone they feel close to. So this works with belonging, this works with relationships, this works if you're not boring them to death with packets and you have engaging instruction. So, 2 different types of behaviors to think about, initiation and continuation. So, Most students don't struggle so much with initiating desired behaviors. Most students can get started on a task. A lot of students struggle with continuing or sustaining desired behaviors. So don't just watch the students that get started immediately. If it's independent work or if it's partner work, they need to be in station, something that they need to do for more than 2 minutes. Be on the lookout for students that are continuing to sustain those behaviors, because that sometimes is a difference for some of these students. They can get started, but they can't continue it. But if they hear that their classmates are getting praise for sustaining behaviors, they're going to want to sustain too, and you're going to want to heap praise. Because here's the thing with praise, guys. There's no satiation effect. If you've ever had a token economy, if you've ever had any type of reward system in the classroom where they get stickers or a prize box, there is a satiation effect. Okay, after a while it gets old. They've got 18 pencils. Why do they need a 19th one? They liked your prize box at the beginning of the year, but now it's just Dollar Tree garbage, right? You have to up the ante. There is a satiation effect with token economies. But what we know from behavioral psychology is that there is no satiation effect. That means they can't be satisfied with too much attention. Everyone wants attention all the time. I mean, that's why TikTok exists, right? That's just the universe screaming, look at me, notice me, I am here. So students will crave your attention all day long. Give this out as much as you can. Praise initiation behaviors, praise continuation behaviors. So, what are 3 different ways to think about this? First, think about a tally chart, right? So print out your class roster, because a lot of times we overestimate how much praise we actually give. Even worse, sometimes our praise tends to coalesce around the best students, and it never reaches the students who need it the most. So, to combat this, do this. Okay? Print out a class roster and just walk around with it. Place a tally mark every single time you praise a student. And after doing this for a few days, look at the patterns. See which students are actually underpraised, and focus on them so they can get more of your differential social attention. Set a time-bound goal, right? So if you want to use a roster, if you want to use tick marks, at the beginning of the year, you're going to need to praise early and often. And if you're doing a classroom management reset, it's just like it's August. You're going to need to praise early and often. You're going to need to keep up a steady stream of commentary. You're going to need to be that play-by-play praiser. So to help this process, you can set a goal of giving a certain number of praise statements within a set time. So 10 praise statements in 5 minutes, 3 statements in a minute. You can use these keeping tally marks, and what you can do is keep up a high volume of praise initially. You're going to want to keep it high until your class is on track. You can never completely go away from it, but you can slow it down later. And then another physical way to think of it is pennies in a pocket, right? So place some pennies or any type of object, Legos or cubes from math, right? And you can designate your left pocket for positive, your right pocket for negative. And every time you give a positive statement, you can transfer, a penny or a cube to the left pocket. But if you find yourself fussing at kids, you can transfer over to the right. And you can see at the end of the day which pocket has more, right? And so that's one way to keep track. If you're trying to break the habit of those negative, fussy statements, every time you give a statement, evaluate, was it positive or negative, was it praise or was it fussing, and then you can move it to one or the other and just give yourself a goal of, I want to have more pennies in the left pocket than the right by the end of the day. Your focus determines your reality. Only reinforce the behaviors you want repeated. And if you stuck with me this long, thank you so much. We're getting to the final one, because I know you've been asking, but what if they don't listen? I've done all that. I've done a classroom agreement. We have a social contract. I've gone over my warnings. I've done everything. They're just not listening. Well, everything I've said up to this point is going to eliminate 95% of your behavioral problems. But you can't plan for everything. There's always going to be that one kid. So how do we make those in-game adjustments? We've talked about belonging, relationship, and engagement. You practice the pro-social behaviors you want to see again and again and again by praising what you want to see, because your focus determines your reality. But how do we make those in-game adjustments when that kid is just not having a good day, or didn't take his medicine, or something crazy happened over the weekend? Let's talk about correction. This is another part of that fourth pillar, discipline. So first, let's talk about our default, and I've said it multiple times during this Facebook Live event. The default form of discipline that teachers will invariably resort to, unless shown a better way, is what I like to call power assertive discipline. Okay? With this method, the adult relies on power, size, or resources to control the child. In other words, the carrot or the stick. I'm going to bribe you and reward you, or I'm going to threaten you. Typically involving a revocation of privileges as the students get older, because we don't necessarily have so much power or size if we're secondary teachers, right? This common type of discipline is problematic because it models antisocial behaviors, and we're going for prosocial. Students who are controlled by threats and punishments, unfortunately, learn to mirror this behavior when they become frustrated. Even though the immediate problem might be solved through forced compliance, a larger issue is brewing. Even worse, over-reliance on power assertion damages the teacher-student relationship. And you can't do much if students don't have that secure attachment and that relationship for you. They're not going to care about all your attention and praise if they don't care about you as a person. When the trusted adult is viewed as a harsh, vindictive disciplinarian, resentment increases. Students will continually face obstacles to meeting their needs, with no better solutions being presented. The adult that should be providing a safe harbor is instead creating a violent storm, and the vicious cycle escalates. If we want to know why kids are bullying others in the classroom, take a look in the mirror. Are they getting those behaviors from you? Are they trying to exert power and control over others because they see that from you? So, rather than simply ignoring things, how do we do things in a respectful way? Well, one idea from the literature is called induction, victim-centered induction. This is a psychologically safe method of discipline. It's a fancy term for reasoning with students during discipline while focusing attention on those that are affected by the misbehavior. So this form of correction involves a few simple steps. First, describe how the student's behavior affects others. Use descriptive language that is non-judgmental, places their actions within a larger social context. Remember, we need a sense of belonging. So they need to feel like they're part of an in-group and that they are connected to others. Because if you can describe their misbehavior as a violation of how it affects others, that's different than just doing something wrong. So instead of, Julius, you are being rude and bothering everyone else, use language that narrates dispassionately, such as, Julius, you were making loud noises with your body, and it was difficult for your table group to concentrate. Second, ask the student to imagine being in the other student's place. This is called perspective taking for those of you that are up with the social emotional language. Imagine what it was like for Susie. She was focused hard on her math problems, but she was distracted by those strange noises. This slight but yet powerful shift in discipline keeps behavior in the realm of social interactions. Remember, we need that strong belonging. When students misbehave, they aren't just hurting themselves, but they're also causing damage to the larger group. As long as they're connected with their classmates through belonging, they will have an aversion to this, because they're not going to want to damage their peer relationships through misbehavior. They're not going to want to be that kid. Kids want to be accepted just like all other humans do. And then thirdly, suggest concrete actions for repair. Remember, discipline is about teaching and practicing missed skills, not punishment. This is not about punishment. How can students make it right? If the misbehaving child is to internalize pro-social behavior, they need a chance to not only behave correctly through practice, but also repair inner relationships that might have become strained because of the interaction. So, for example, Julius, you can apologize to your table mates for distracting them. You can also get up and step into the hallway quickly if you feel like a distracting noise is going to come out of your body. This type of discipline induction keeps things running smoothly while helping students develop social control, self-control, and pro-social behavior. Discipline encounters will inevitably create negative emotions in students such as embarrassment, anger, and anxiety. The goal is for students to internalize the interpretations of these emotions so that they lead to the internalization of values from their teacher. For example, Julius would hopefully think, I feel embarrassed, not because I did something wrong, but because I distracted Susie, and I made it hard for her to work on math. They feel like they can change their behavior. You don't want them to internalize, I am a bad kid, but I did something wrong, but that's not who I am. This type of discussion is typically used after an episode is concluded, when you have a chance to talk to a child dispassionately. This is not what you do in the middle of a meltdown. What do we do in the middle of a meltdown? Well, here's another method. This is what I call the DRIPS method. This is when you need immediate compliance. So, this action is the last resort when immediate compliance is required. When the misbehavior is so egregious or distracting, or receiving enough attention from peers that ignoring it or praising positive behaviors in others won't really cause it to cease, the DRIPS method is a slow, persistent persuasion that acts like dripping water on stone, slowly eroding it at one drip at a time. Imagine that first grade teacher has asked the class to go to the carpet for reading, and Jennifer is refusing, sitting at her desk. So first, give the directive, D. Instead of telling students what to stop doing, tell them what to start doing. So, for example, Jennifer, come take a seat on the carpet so we can begin the read aloud. Make sure you tell her what you want her to do instead of what you want her to stop doing. Second, include a rationale. If there isn't a rationale for doing something, it might not be a directive that's worth fighting for. So you might say, we have a new picture book today, and you won't be able to see the illustration from your desk. There should be a reason as to why you want the student to comply. Third, iterate. That's just a fancy word for repeat. Like a broken record, repeat the directive and rationale with minor tweaks and adjustments to make each repetition new. Jennifer, it's time to come to the carpet. I think you'll like the pictures in our new book, and I want you to be able to see them. If you're back here, you might miss some of the hidden details the illustrator included. Fourth, this is when we need to prime the pump a little bit. We can remind the student of past compliance. We're going to help students take the first mental step toward meeting our expectations. For example, remember how you noticed the flower hidden behind the shed in the book we read yesterday? I wonder if you'll find something else like that today. What you're wanting is you're wanting to activate the student's social identity in this fourth step here of, I am a compliant student. I am a part of the group that meets expectations. So you're priming the pump. You're reminding them that they're not a bad kid, but they are a generally compliant kid. And then finally, that S in DRIPS is stick with it. Instead of getting angry or including an or else statement, because if you do all of this, but then you get angry or include an or else statement, you've lost it. You just stick with it. You keep going through the first four steps. You give a directive, give a rationale, you make it a little bit different, you remind them of past compliance. Eventually, the student will get tired of it. They will comply. And when they do, you immediately praise them for their action. You want to immediately reinforce the fact that they follow directions. So, how do we help students fight success? Think about these three strategies when you want to correct misbehavior. First, the first option is to focus attention on someone doing something right. Find someone doing the correct actions that is close to the student doing the negative misbehavior here, and then praise that student. Praise them with personal, recurring, assorted, immediate, specific, and enthusiastic words. This provides the offending student, the students that are not meeting your expectations, a shame-free way to correct their behavior. If this solves the problem, then immediately, once again, praise the new behavior in the student to reinforce that. Second, if that's not going to work, sometimes the praise helps, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, behavior reinforces the attention. The behavior that receives attention is reinforced. So fussing at a kid to stop being annoying, unfortunately draws attention to that behavior and makes it more likely to be seen in the future. If that behavior, this is where you as an educator have to make an evaluation. Can I ignore it? If the behavior is not disrupting the class but is simply a minor nuisance, ignore it until the behavior stops. After it has ceased, provide the student with a learning opportunity using this victim-centered induction, or what I call air it out, the 3 steps here. Describe how the behavior A affected others. Remember that relating the misbehavior to how it affects peers will keep the social impact at the forefront of the student's mind. Secondly, I imagine the other student's feelings that arose due to their behavior. And then third, R, repair. Give the student concrete actions to repair the relationship. This teaches empathy and equips students with positive actions that they can use in the future. These 3 steps, affect, imagine, repair, are a method to address misbehavior and teach students missing skills after a behavioral incident has elapsed, or if you can do it in a way that is not going to give them attention in front of class. If everyone else is doing something, you can squat down next to a student, have a conversation with them. But if you need immediate compliance, use the DRIPS method. This is the last resort. When the misbehavior is so egregious or distracting or receiving enough attention from peers that ignoring it or praising positive behaviors won't cause it to cease, you're going to use this DRIPS method. And you're going to go through these steps, right? You're going to give the directive, provide a rationale. You're going to iterate again and again and again. Directive, rationale, directive, rationale. You're going to remind them of past compliance to prime the pump and activate their social identity with those norms of being a compliant child. And then you stick with it. It's a game of chicken, and they want you to get angry. They want you to yell. They want you to try to force them to do stuff, right? And if you don't swerve first, the second they swerve, you praise them and you move on. There's no punishment needed. Once you get the behavior you want, that's what you're looking for. You praise it and you move on. All discipline encounters are teaching moments. And when we see these discipline encounters as teaching moments rather than moments for punishment, we're ready to help our kids. So, those are the steps here. That's how we make in-game adjustments through praise and through discipline. So this is it. Thank you for sticking with me. This QR code is a link to the Winning Classroom Management link on my webpage. You can also just find it, aarondaffern.com. There's a button at the top about a free ebook. If you want to go back through this, I will put this webinar video linked on my website, and you can also read it at your own page. You can also email me at aarondaffern.com. In addition to the books, I also have webinars available. I also do school trainings, so if you are or are connected with a principal that might be interested in learning about how you can use some of these things for your classroom, please reach out to me. Thank you, everyone. Be safe. Stay warm.